a $68 patent filing fee. That was the barrier standing between a Latvian immigrant tailor and the most valuable piece of clothing ever invented. In 1872, Jacob Davis had already sold 200 pairs of his reinforced work pants to Nevada miners. He knew his copper rivets would revolutionize workwear. He also knew that without a patent, competitors would steal his idea within months. The problem, Jacob Davis didn't have $68. So he wrote a letter to his fabric supplier in San Francisco, a man named Levi Strauss. That letter, with its broken English and desperate pitch, would create a $6 million fortune and spawn an industry worth billions. Here's the hidden truth. Levi Strauss never invented blue jeans. He bankrolled them. And that distinction between the man who solved the problem and the man who owned the solution reveals everything about how American industry actually worked in the Gilded Age. Movies show rugged individualists striking it rich through hard work and ingenuity. The documentary evidence shows something different. Innovation required capital. Capital flowed to those who already had it. A $68 gap between invention and ownership determined whose name would become synonymous with American workwear for the next century and a half. Reno, Nevada, December 1870. The town didn't exist 2 years earlier. The Central Pacific Railroad had rolled through in June 1868, transforming a muddy toll crossing on the Truckee River into a supply hub for the richest silver strike in American history. Myron Lake, who had operated a toll bridge at this crossing since the early 1860s, sold 107 acres to the railroad company. On May 9, 1868, they auctioned off the first lots. They named the instant town after General Jesse Lee Reno, a Union officer killed at the Battle of South Mountain 6 years prior. Within months, Virginia Street ran straight south toward the Comstock mines, becoming the supply corridor for an extraction economy that dwarfed anything California's gold rush had produced. 25 miles south, Virginia City sat atop the Comstock lode, where men pulled $35 million in silver and gold from the earth in 1877 alone. The total production from 1859 to 1878 reached $320 million, with a net profit of $55 million. At its peak, Virginia City's population reached 25,000, making it the largest city between Denver and San Francisco. The mines employed thousands of workers in 12-hour shifts, descending 3,000 feet into tunnels where temperatures reached 120 degrees from the hot water seeping through rock. Steam-powered pumps ran continuously to prevent flooding. Square-set timber frames, invented on the Comstock specifically to handle its unstable ore bodies, prevented cave-ins while consuming 80 million feet of Sierra Nevada lumber annually. These men earned $4 a day, the highest mining wages in the world, and they destroyed their clothing at a rate that kept every tailor within 50 miles in constant business. Jacob Davis had arrived in Reno in 1868, the same year as the railroad. Born Jacob Euphes in the Latvian city of Riga in 1831, he'd trained as a tailor before immigrating to America in 1854. His journey traced the pattern of so many 19th-century immigrants. Restless movement across an expanding nation, each stop representing another failed attempt to find prosperity. New York first, where he ran a tailor's shop and Americanized his name. Then Maine, then San Francisco in 1856, followed by Weaverville in California's gold country. In 1858, he left for British Columbia, prospecting, selling tobacco, trading in wholesale pork. There he met Annie Parkshire, a German immigrant. They married in Victoria on January 3, 1865, and eventually had 6 children. Davis returned to San Francisco in 1867, tried the coal business, failed again. The family moved to Virginia City, where he opened a tobacco store before returning to tailoring. By 1868, they had settled in Reno, a tiny railroad town that promised nothing except proximity to the Comstock boom. Davis was 40 years old, had failed at half a dozen enterprises, and had no reason to expect his seventh attempt would be different. His shop at 31 Virginia Street made practical items for railroad workers and miners: tents, horse blankets, wagon covers. The fabric came from Levi Strauss and Company, a wholesale dry goods business in San Francisco. Davis ordered heavy cotton duck cloth by the bolt. He had no reason to think this routine supplier relationship would change his life. That December, a woman walked into his shop with a request that would alter the trajectory of American industry. Her husband was a woodcutter, a large man who tore through pants like they were made of paper, the pockets ripped first. Always the pockets. Could Davis make something that would actually hold together? He looked at his work table. Copper rivets sat there, the same ones he used to reinforce horse blanket straps. What if he fastened the pocket corners with metal instead of relying on thread alone? He charged the woman $3 for duck cloth pants, $2.50 for blue denim. Within weeks, word spread among the Comstock miners. Davis couldn't sew fast enough to meet demand. In 18 months, he'd sold 200 pairs. Keep that number in mind. 200 pairs, made by one tailor working alone. By 1908, Levi Strauss and Company would employ 450 workers, producing riveted clothing at industrial scale. The Comstock load created the demand that Jacob Davis filled. To understand why miners needed indestructible pants, you need to understand the violence that silver extraction inflicted on human bodies. Underground, men worked with pickaxes and dynamite in passages so hot they stripped to their underwear. Water dripping from the walls reached temperatures of 150 degrees. The Yellow Jacket mine fire of 1869 killed at least 35 men, their bodies trapped in sealed-off tunnels where flames burned for years. Flooding was constant. The famous Sutro Tunnel, completed in 1878, drained the mines through 4 miles of underground excavation that cost $3.5 million. Men hauled ore in handcarts through tunnels where wooden supports groaned under millions of tons of mountain. Surface workers processed rock through stamp mills that crushed 80 tons per shift, the machinery screaming loud enough to cause permanent deafness. The milling process separated silver from ore using mercury amalgamation, the Washoe process invented specifically for Comstock extraction. Workers inhaled mercury vapor daily. Their clothing absorbed chemicals, rock dust, hot water, the constant abrasion of moving through narrow passages. Pockets weren't a fashion detail. They held the tools that kept men alive. Candles, matches, the small implements needed to shore up a collapsing wall or pry open a jammed cart. When a pocket tore, a man might lose his light source 1,000 feet underground. Davis's rivets weren't about durability alone. They were about survival. The first copper-riveted pants kept pocket contents secure in conditions that would destroy any ordinary garment within weeks. By 1872, Davis faced a problem that success creates. He'd solved the pocket-tearing issue. Everyone knew he'd solved it. Any tailor with access to copper rivets could copy his method. The solution was a patent, but the filing fee of $68 exceeded his available cash. He'd already applied for patents on other inventions: a steam-powered canal boat, a device for breaking quartz, a tailor's ironing board. Most had failed. This time he needed a partner with deeper pockets. On an unrecorded date in early 1872, Davis sat down to write the most consequential business letter in fashion history. The letter survives in Levi Strauss Company archives, its phonetic spelling revealing Davis's immigrant origins. He enclosed a check for $350 for fabric and described his riveted pants. "The secret of them pants is the rivets that I put in those pockets," he wrote. "I charge for the duck $3 and the blue $2.50 a pair. My neighbors are getting jealous of these success, and unless I secure it by patent papers, it will soon become to be a general thing. Everybody will make them up, and there will be no money in it. His proposition was direct. Levi Strauss would pay the $68 patent fee. In return, Davis would grant him half the manufacturing rights for the Pacific states and territories. Should you decline to spend the amount required for the patent papers, please write to me, Davis concluded, and I will take them out at my own expense. He couldn't, of course. But the bluff worked. Levi Strauss recognized opportunity when it arrived in his mailbox. Born Loeb Strauss in Bavaria in 1829, he'd immigrated to New York in 1847 and moved to San Francisco in 1853, arriving just as the gold rush transformed the city into the commercial hub of the West Coast. His was a family business. His older brothers, Jonas and Louis, operated J. Strauss Brother and Company in New York, a wholesale dry goods firm at 108 Liberty Street. Levi became their West Coast representative, opening Levi Strauss and Company to import and distribute their merchandise throughout the expanding Western territories. He never panned for gold himself. Instead, he sold supplies to those who did: clothing, bedding, fabric, household goods. By 1866, his business had grown enough to require expanded headquarters. By 1872, Levi Strauss and Company occupied a major wholesale operation on Battery Street and supplied general stores throughout California, Nevada, Oregon, and the surrounding territories. Strauss himself had become a pillar of San Francisco's commercial elite. He served as a director of the Nevada Bank and the Liverpool, London, and Globe Insurance Company. He was a charter member of the San Francisco Board of Trade. He helped establish Congregation Emmanuel, the first Jewish synagogue in the city, and donated generously to orphanages and charitable funds. He wore formal suits, lived with his sister Fanny's family, and walked to his office each day. He would never, in his entire life, wear a pair of the work pants that made his name immortal. Strauss saw in Davis's letter what the tailor himself perhaps didn't fully grasp. Not just a good product, but a monopoly opportunity. A patent would lock out competitors for 17 years. During that time, anyone who wanted riveted work pants would have to buy from Levi Strauss and Company or face legal action. The $68 filing fee was trivial against potential returns. Strauss agreed to Davis's terms immediately. The patent application moved forward, initially rejected for being too broad, then revised and resubmitted. On May 20, 1873, the United States Patent Office granted patent number 392921 for an improvement in fastening pocket openings to Jacob W. Davis and Levi Strauss and Company. The document described the method with bureaucratic precision. Copper rivets inserted at points of strain to distribute stress across metal rather than thread. The patent covered work pants, overalls, vests, any garment where pockets required reinforcement. Davis packed up his family and moved to San Francisco, where Strauss installed him as production manager of a new manufacturing operation. The original waist overalls looked nothing like modern jeans. They had a single back pocket, no belt loops, and buttons for suspenders because belts weren't yet standard men's fashion. A cinch in the back allowed wearers to adjust the fit. The watch pocket on the front dated to an era when men carried timepieces. Rivets appeared at every stress point, including one at the crotch that would survive, until complaints about hot metal on flesh finally eliminated it during World War II. The denim came from Amos Keg Manufacturing Company in Manchester, New Hampshire, woven in 9-ounce weight with a twill weave that became softer with washing. Davis also made pants from brown cotton duck, the canvas-like fabric he'd used for his original design. Denim proved more popular. By 1911, Levi Strauss and Company stopped producing the duck version entirely. Here's what transformed a niche workwear product into a corporate empire: the expiration of patent 139,121 in 1890. For 17 years, Levi Strauss held a legal monopoly on riveted pants. Competitors could make denim workwear, but they couldn't add rivets without facing lawsuits. Strauss prosecuted infringers aggressively, filing the first case in 1874 and continuing throughout the following decade. Court documents from these proceedings provide some of the best primary evidence about the invention's origins, including Davis's sworn testimony about creating the first pair for a woodcutter's wife. During the patent period, the company scaled production methodically. First, they employed seamstresses working from their homes, a common practice in 19th-century garment manufacturing. This cottage industry model kept overhead low while building market demand. By the 1880s, volume required dedicated factory space. Levi Strauss & Company built manufacturing facilities in San Francisco, with Davis supervising operations and ensuring quality control. The assembly line technique, which would revolutionize American manufacturing in the 20th century, was already being implemented in these early factories. Workers specialized in specific tasks: cutting fabric, attaching rivets, sewing seams, applying the distinctive arcuate stitching pattern to back pockets. When the patent expired, imitators flooded the market. Levi Strauss & Company responded with branding. The same year, 1890, they assigned lot numbers to their products. The copper-riveted waist overalls received the designation 501. Nobody today knows why that specific number was chosen. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake and subsequent fire destroyed company headquarters, factories, and most historical records. What survived were the products themselves and the brand elements that made them recognizable. They added the two-horse brand leather patch in 1886, depicting two horses trying unsuccessfully to pull apart a pair of pants. The image conveyed durability better than any advertising slogan. They trademarked the double-arc stitch pattern on back pockets, creating a design element that remains the oldest apparel trademark still in use today. Davis himself added the orange threaded stitching to distinguish genuine Levi's from knockoffs. Every visible detail served a dual purpose: functional improvement and brand differentiation. The numbers tell the story of success. In 1880, Levi Strauss & Company recorded sales of $2.4 million, though this included their entire dry goods inventory, not just riveted clothing. By the 1890s, the company had pivoted almost entirely to manufacturing its own products. Jacob Davis supervised a workforce that eventually reached 450 employees. His son Simon joined the company and would help rebuild operations after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake destroyed headquarters, factories, and most company records. That disaster explains why no one today knows why the number 501 was chosen or exactly how many pairs of waist overalls were produced in those early decades. The documentation simply doesn't exist anymore. Levi Strauss died on September 26, 1902, at his San Francisco home on Leavenworth Street. He was 73 years old, had never married, and left no direct heirs. The following morning, San Francisco newspapers ran extensive obituaries praising his business acumen and philanthropy. Shopkeepers throughout the city closed their businesses to attend his funeral. The San Francisco Call described him as possessing broad and generous love for and sympathy with humanity. His estate totaled nearly $6 million, equivalent to approximately $200 million in current purchasing power. In 1877, his fortune had already exceeded $4 million, and it had only grown larger in the subsequent 25 years. He left the bulk of this fortune to his 4 nephews, Jacob, Sigmund, Louis, and Abraham Stern, the sons of his sister Fanny and her husband David Stern. All 4 had worked in the company and assumed leadership upon his death. He also made provisions for numerous charities: the Pacific Hebrew Orphan Asylum, the Roman Catholic and Protestant Orphan Asylums, the Eureka Benevolent Society, the Emmanuel Sisterhood. Before his death, he had funded 28 perpetual scholarships at the University of California, Berkeley, endowments that still exist today. The man who bankrolled blue jeans never claimed credit for inventing them. Contemporary accounts consistently identified Davis as the inventor, and Strauss himself never suggested otherwise. The company's continuity after Strauss's death proved its institutional strength. When the 1906 earthquake devastated San Francisco, destroying the Levi Strauss headquarters on Battery Street, the Stern nephews kept operations running. They extended credit to retailers who had lost everything. They rebuilt factories. Simon Davis, Jacob Davis's son, helped reorganize production and would later design new products, including children's play suits. The company that began with a $68 patent investment survived natural disaster, economic panics, 2 world wars, and every shift in fashion that the 20th century would bring. Jacob Davis lived 6 more years, dying on January 20th, 1908. Unlike his famous partner, Davis actually wore the pants he'd created, photographed late in life in the riveted workwear that bore another man's name. His obituaries were shorter than Strauss's. His contribution faded into footnote status until 1974, when a researcher named Anne Morgan Campbell discovered court transcripts from an 1874 patent infringement case. In those documents, Davis testified under oath about creating the first pair of riveted pants for a woodcutter's wife in December 1870. The discovery restored his place in denim history, though Levi Strauss remains the name that 7 billion people on Earth associate with blue jeans. The pattern here extends beyond clothing. A skilled craftsman solves a practical problem. He lacks the capital to protect and scale his innovation. A merchant with money but no technical expertise provides the funding. The merchant's name becomes synonymous with the product, while the inventor's name disappears. This dynamic shaped industries from sewing machines to automobiles to personal computers. Isaac Singer didn't invent the sewing machine. He bought and marketed Elias Howe's patents. Henry Ford didn't invent the automobile. He systematized production and financing. The names we remember belong to those who controlled capital, not necessarily those who created the underlying innovation. Davis needed Strauss's $68. Strauss needed Davis's rivets. The partnership worked because each man possessed what the other lacked, but partnerships don't guarantee equal historical recognition. When historians search for the inventor of blue jeans, they find Jacob Davis's name on the patent. When consumers shop for jeans, they see Levi Strauss's name on the label. The distinction matters because it reveals how credit flows in commercial society, toward those who fund innovation, not always toward those who achieve it. Consider what $68 purchased in 1873. A miner earning $4 per day worked 17 days to earn that amount. A skilled laborer in San Francisco might earn $2 daily, meaning a month's wages. A pair of riveted pants cost between $2 and $3, meaning the patent fee represented roughly 30 pairs of pants. Davis, who had already sold 200 pairs, generated revenue of perhaps $500 from his invention before seeking the patent. He couldn't allocate $68 from that income. Family expenses for 6 children, fabric costs paid to Levi Strauss's company, shop rent on Virginia Street, the endless demands of survival consumed everything. Meanwhile, Levi Strauss, with assets eventually exceeding $6 million, could have covered the fee from pocket change. The distribution of initial capital determined who would own half the rights to the most successful garment in history. In 2022, a pair of 1880s Levi's waist overalls sold at auction in New Mexico for $87,400. A denim archaeologist had discovered them in an abandoned mine shaft, preserved by the dry underground conditions. The jeans bore an interior pocket label that read, "The only kind made," by white labor, a slogan Levi Strauss & Company adopted after the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. and abandoned in the 1890s. The company now acknowledges this as a shameful chapter, noting that social pressure following the racist legislation led them to adopt policies they have since condemned. But the jeans themselves represent something more durable than historical prejudice. They survived 140 years underground because Jacob Davis solved the pocket problem with copper rivets. They're worth $87,000 because Levi Strauss turned a tailor's innovation into an industrial standard. The waist overalls became jeans in 1960 when baby boomers adopted the shortened term. The miners, railroad workers, and cowboys who originally wore them never used that word. They called them overalls, or Levi's, or simply work pants. The transformation from labor uniform to fashion statement occurred gradually, accelerated by Hollywood films in the 1950s that associated denim with youthful rebellion. James Dean wore Levi's. Marlon Brando wore Levi's. The garment designed for men destroying their bodies in silver mines became the costume of teenagers destroying their parents' expectations. Today, the company founded on a $68 patent filing sells products in 110 countries. The 501 style remains in continuous production, essentially the same design that Jacob Davis created in his Reno tailor shop, with copper rivets at the stress points and indigo denim woven in a left-hand twill. Levi Strauss and Company went public in 1971, returned to private family ownership in 1984, and went public again in 2019. The descendants of Levi Strauss's nephews retain controlling interest, their collective net worth exceeding $4 billion. The company employs approximately 16,000 people worldwide. Annual revenues exceed $6 billion. All of this flows from a single innovation, using copper rivets to reinforce pocket openings. Jacob Davis understood the solution. Levi Strauss understood the market. Neither could have built this empire alone. The Comstock Lode played out by the 1880s. Virginia City's population collapsed from 25,000 to a few thousand residents. Story County, which had been the wealthiest county per capita in the United States, became a near ghost town. The silver that built San Francisco's mansions, funded the Union during the Civil War, and financed Union Pacific Railroad construction had been extracted, processed, and spent. The stamp mills fell silent. The pumps that drained the mines stopped running. The timber-framed tunnels collapsed into the mountain. But the pants created to serve Comstock miners outlasted the mines themselves. The demand that Jacob Davis satisfied in December 1870 never disappeared. It simply moved. Cowboys on cattle drives needed durable pants. Railroad workers laying track across the Great Plains needed them. Farmers breaking sod in the Dakotas needed them. Factory workers in eastern cities discovered that riveted workwear outlasted anything else available. Every expansion of American industry expanded the market for riveted clothing. The Comstock Lode was one source of demand among many. Its decline barely registered in Levi Strauss and Company's sales figures. Every time someone pulls on a pair of jeans anywhere in the world, they're wearing Jacob Davis's solution to a problem first articulated by a woodcutter's wife in December 1870. She wanted pants that wouldn't tear at the pockets. Davis gave her copper rivets. Strauss gave those rivets to the world. The $68 that separated invention from empire now seems almost comically small. But in 1872, $68 was the difference between a tailor with a good idea and a partnership that would clothe humanity.